This episode of the lifestyle.org podcast you don't want to miss. We have Garner Holt from Garner Holt Productions, the largest producer of animatronics in the world. Don't go away. So Garner Holt, president and founder of Garner Holt Productions, the largest producer of animatronics in the world. You've done some incredible things. I just want people to understand from the beginning, before we go into your story, you've done a lot. I mean, I've been walking through the warehouse here. I saw Grogu there. I saw guys from Monsters, Inc. I saw stuff from Cars, the Radiator Springs ride at Disney. I'm seeing stuff from Universal Studios parks. What are some of the things that you're the most excited about doing?
Well, we have such a long list, it's almost hard to remember, even for myself, how many things we've worked on.
Yeah.
We have had so many projects worldwide. We've worked in 36 different countries. We've had we've built thousands and thousands of figures, hundreds and over 450 for the Disney company, Universal, all those. We've done Buzz Lightyears and Monsters and Nemos and Mermaids and Phantasmic Dragons and the Matterhorn Snowman, some of the most iconic characters that Disney has, a lot in the Disney parks worldwide, basically. Jungle Cruise, I mean, you name it. We've been in almost every attraction at some of the parks. So it's been quite a ride.
It is quite a ride. And I wish everyone could have had the experience I had of walking through this warehouse and seeing some of the most iconic characters that you bring to life. And it's really great to see you at this level. The people we work with at lifestyle.org, it's about people finding their highest peak level of success and performance. And you've definitely reach this level that is even beyond comprehension as we walk through your warehouse. But it didn't, all these stories don't start with major success right away. Did you always, ever since you were a kid, want to be a guy that did animatronics, or did you have a different path starting out?
Well, the way I usually tell the story is, I come from a horse family, and all of my relatives, my uncles, one of the uncles was a rodeo champion and roper and a world champion. One of them had a riding stable, horse riding stables. My dad was a racehorse trainer. And I was on the back of a horse from probably 2 weeks old and I have pictures to prove that, until I was about 10 years old.
Yeah. And
so they had aspirations of me going to college and becoming a veterinarian. And that was kind of, they determined that was going to be my life.
Wow.
And if you're a horse family, you got a kid that's a veterinarian, that really helps.
Oh, you're set.
But so I would come home after riding horses all day, and I would basically come in and watch the movie monsters. I would watch the Munsters, and I would watch Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman and all that, all the Universal movie monsters. Yeah. And so I really loved that kind of thing. And so basically it all happened. It all started one day when I saw a thing on The World of Color, which was a Disney show back then. The Osmonds went through this place called the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. They toured it. It just had opened. It opened around 1969. I flipped out and I thought, there's an actual house that's full of things like this. And unlike the Munsters, you actually go to. So I begged my parents to take me to Disneyland and to see that. And they eventually did. And I basically told them on the way home, I still remember leaning over the seat of the car while they're driving me home saying, Mom and Dad, I want to build the things at Disneyland. I want to make Disneyland. I want to make my own Disneyland. And I want to do those things the rest of my life. I don't want to be a veterinarian. I want to do that. So that's really was the turning point. And that's from that point on, that's about all I could think about until probably today.
How old were you at that time?
Probably in the 12-year-old range, 12 maybe. So I was just getting into junior high school, and my mom bought me the Haunted Mansion record at Kmart, and I acted it out in school, and I mean I was obsessed. It was crazy.
I think people have to be obsessed to reach their highest levels of success, and I think that's where people don't understand the creative entrepreneur's journey
Mhm.
is unless you obsess about something, you'll never master it.
Kind of like something flips a switch and
Yeah.
you just like launch on something and it's like you just never
Yeah.
never goes away.
Yeah. You just can't stop thinking about it.
But
Yeah.
mine's been a fun path because, I've always had this thing about entertainment and entertaining people. I always,
Hmm.
when I was in school,
Yeah.
I think I wanted to be an entertainer of some sort, maybe, but deep down inside, but I couldn't sing or dance or anything. So I thought, well, I was always behind the scenes, like in theaters and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was all about, and then my life has been about building big toys that make people smile and
Yeah.
entertain people in parks. So that's really.
So where did you start as a kid? At 12 years old, you say, I'm going to do this. What was the first thing that you built?
Well, just this last July 29th would be 45 years ago that I put my name on my parents' garage and said, this is Garner Holt Productions. And I put a card table in the garage in the corner. And that's where it started, on a little table about this big.
Yeah.
And I started tinkering with, little parts and wooden string. And I'd entertain the kids in the neighborhood with gadgets and things all around, little things I'd try in the backyard, little attractions that I'd try to build and haunted houses and things like that.
So you're in junior high and you're building haunted houses. What was your first haunted house? What was the response from the neighborhood?
Well, I did a lot of stuff in the neighborhood or in the backyard that kind of endangered a lot of kids in the neighborhood. So I strung cable up and made a skyway, and I pulled kids on a bucket over the yard. And they go up a ladder and I charge them 10 cents. And it was my Disneyland Skyway, right?
Yeah.
And my parents come home from the market and hear these kids hanging over the yard. So they shut that down pretty quick. So they felt, I think, that if I was in a box, which was this little shack that I built, that I would be kind of safe. I'm not flying in the air or something, I'm in this little box.
Yeah.
So I built a little shack haunted house, and, one thing led to another. Long story short, I rode my bike down to the paper, got an ad. They wouldn't sell me an ad, but a reporter heard me talk about it. So he came out and took pictures, basically turned into an article, and 400 people showed up one day for the Halloween haunt. And here's this little shack and raining, leaking water. And it was a mess, but it was the beginning of me seeing that I could entertain people.
Yeah. Now I've heard that you had a very creative approach to the materials for building that shack. Because most kids look and say, I'd love to build something, I just don't have the money or the raw materials. What did you use to build that shack?
It happened to be around an election time for the city.
Yeah.
And they put up plywood campaign signs all over the place. And when the election was over, I thought, wow, free plywood. So I went all over. I rode around on my bike with my friends and collected all these signs off of fences and that great big pieces of plywood. And I had enough plywood to build, a mansion as far as I was concerned.
I love that, because, even as a kid, you were saying, I've got a passion. I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to allow myself the excuses of not having the natural resource. And I think that's one of the important things for people to understand who have a passion. We tend to look at, well, I don't have. You looked around and said, where can I get it? Mm-hmm. And I imagine you still do that today when you're approaching projects that you're like, boy, I've never done that one yet. Where can I get what I need for that? So I think that's so cool. So you start out, you have this haunted house in your backyard and a newspaper article about it. How did that launch the next stage of your career?
So one day I'm in class in junior high school, and I get a call slip to the office, which wasn't uncommon for me at the time, and see the principal. And I went in, and they said, "We have a phone call here from the director of Central City Mall, which was a large mall in San Bernardino." And so I what could this be about? So I called him up, and the lady said, "We heard you had a successful haunted house. Could you build one for the mall?" And so that started a whole chain of events happening, which included me buying from a neighbor an old burned out trailer that was a construction trailer that I bought for several $100s with some seed money from my parents and some of my other events that I'd done. And so I spent a year, converting it to Garner Holt's Haunted House and Mystery. And that was the beginning of my haunted house business. which other malls heard about that, and then they wanted haunted houses. So I just kind of got into the haunted house business in Southern California.
How old were you at this time?
Well, I incorporated the business in the state of California. I was 15. I had 2 haunted houses going where my parents still had to drive me to work because I didn't have my license yet.
Oh,
So I mean, it was pretty early on. I asked for a business suit for my birthday, and you know, parents are always willing to buy something, make their kid look good. So I got a suit, and I went down to Goodwill and I bought a briefcase for 25 cents. And so I hauled this briefcase around like I was a businessman going into all these malls and everything. I couldn't even drive yet. But I was, in my mind, I was a businessman selling haunted houses, you know?
Yeah. At age 15. That is amazing. So then you did these haunted houses. What next?
Well, I always wanted to get into the theme park business, and I thought I was going to be Imagineer at Disneyland or at Disney. You know,
that was your desire. Is Disney will recognize your talent, will hire you someday. As one of the.
So I built an uncle's. It was around bicentennial 1976, and as I was in high school. And so I built a figure, Uncle Sam figure that had a standing feature. He could stand up, and he was a little animated figure that I built out of. Some of the parts in him were fence posts that I cut down in my dad's ranch, that were metal parts because I needed metal to build the thing. So I built it, and it worked, and I got a lot of publicity, actually national publicity on it. It was Uncle Sam for the bicentennial. I showed him in the mall. I had connections with the mall, so I built a little stage, showed him in the mall. And actually National Geographic even did a little feature on it. So it got a lot of publicity. So I thought, wow, I'm getting a lot of attention for this. So some friends at my AV club at school brought the camera out and said, let's film this. And I put a sheet up behind him in the back as a backdrop, and in the garage, filmed him, and we just sent the tape to Imagineering. They called, they came out, some of the top engineers from Imagineering came out to look at him. I tried to, I asked them, I said, well, I showed you my workshop. Can I see your workshop? So I got the tour of Imagineering and all that. Tried to negotiate working there at Imagineering, but it didn't work out. They wanted me to go to college. They said, you need to go to school. We don't know what we're going to do with a 15-year-old to 16-year-old. They said, you need to focus on doing a school thing, And I told my parents, I said, I want to start now. I want to do my own business. But that doesn't work, and I'll go back to school and go work for Disney. But I want to try my own thing first. And that's how it started.
Wow. So you start getting this traction, but yet your greatest desire to work for Disney, doors are shutting. What did that do to you emotionally during that time?
I was devastated. I was devastated. I thought it was all leading up to me being an Imagineer. I was depressed. Because it just didn't look like that was going to happen. And the ominous thought of, here's this kid in the garage starting a business to build animatronics. I mean, you don't know what the future holds. So, it's kind of like, wow, this is scary. But I told my parents, I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to see if I can do something, make work. I started building, displays and things for malls, some Christmas stuff here and there and everything else. And eventually I landed through some strange events. I landed a job at MGM in Vegas. They were building a small theme park with the largest hotel in the world at the time. And they had a little park that they had built there for a while. And I ended up landing the animation and effects and everything for the largest ride there. I had no employees. I had never worked in a theme park. I had never been a contractor before. I had no idea what I was doing. But I talked them into using me to build the stuff just by showing them what I'd done before.
So is this like right out of high school that this comes? Or? Yeah. So right out of high school, I remember, because I think it was 1993, I visited Vegas for the first time. They were trying to make it family friendly. So MGM has this big theme park. And I remember it was like a log ride or something that had all these, gold miners, a 49er,
It was,
guys there. And
it was quite a bunch of figures. when you say right out of high school, there was a big gap of time that in the 80s that, I struggled for a long time. I was the only employee for many years.
Hmm.
I slept in a sleeping bag on the floor of my shop.
Hmm.
It was my home.
Yeah.
And, I had friends that come over and work on projects, for pizza because I couldn't afford to pay anybody. So
Wow.
I struggled for a long time just to keep the lights on,
Yeah.
but it was, and I had a few other small projects, but when I landed MGM, I mustered all my friends together and said, "Hey, you're not working for pizza anymore. I'm going to pay you now." And,
Yeah.
and we started working on it.
So I've heard that because this landing the MGM deal was really, I mean, this is
Oh,
huge.
it was a theme park. I'm building figures for a theme
Yeah,
park.
yeah. I mean, you're starting to step in to what your business is now. But I heard that the executive said, well, before we decide who we're going to give the contract to, we need to visit the different companies. What was
Mhm.
the experience like when they came to visit your shop?
Well, they called one day and said, "We want to do some due diligence just to check you out and make sure that," and they said,
And your heart started.
yeah, and we're going to bring some people out to the plant where you're building this stuff. We're going to build this stuff potentially. And I about had a heart attack. And I had, like I said, I had no employees really, or
Yeah,
just a riffraff group of my friends. And
yeah.
so I got my mom, put her in the reception seat. I got a cousin, put him in a lab coat and put him in an electronic room,
That's
and a
great.
bunch of other relatives sprinkled out throughout the shop. And then my dad, the horse trainer, um, he came in, and I said, "Dad, just go in the back, and when the suit guys go by, just push all this metal into the grinder and make as many sparks and as much noise as you can, so it looks like we're a factory that's like
Yeah,
building other things." You know what I
yeah.
mean? And they did that. They came through, and we're making noise, and everybody's working. I'm thinking, man, I hope they don't think like, why does everybody look like him? Why are they look like they're all related?
Oh, that's funny.
So,
Because
my
most of
my
them
mom's
are.
sitting there,
Yeah.
because they're all relatives. But it worked, and they said, "Yeah, looks like you have a regular going business here, so we'll give you the job." So
Wow.
that's how it all started.
That's amazing. So that worked, but that's pretty hard, doing individual, like they all have to look different. And that's hard to build a business when it's constant, creating a new item, whatever. What ended up happening to allow you to really explode your business?
Well, a lot of it was because of that. So Fred Benninger, who is the chairman of MGM at the
Yeah,
time, who I kind of befriended me, kind of took me under his wing
yeah,
because I was this kid, and I guess they figured I was talented enough to build the attraction. So,
hmm,
or the figures. So he asked me, I kind of had a little bit of a rapport with him. And I asked him, I said, "Mr. Benninger," I said, if I do a good job here and I finish on time and I do everything great, would you recommend me to others? And he said, "Absolutely." He said, "Well," he said, "I'll, do whatever I can to get you going."
yeah,
So after MGM was successful, we were one of the first companies done on site, and he was very happy with the product. And I reminded him of that, and he says, "Oh, I'm gonna, tell other people in Vegas about you." So we ended up doing working on a Vegas musical. We did some other things in Vegas. I get a call one day from a guy by the name of Gary Prim. He says, "I own Prima Donna Resorts on State Line."
hmm,
He said, "We're building a log ride. Fred says you do great work, so come on out here." So that was another attraction.
yeah.
And then the people connected with that log ride that were doing the scenery were connected with Knott's Berry Farm.
Nice.
So that led me to Knott's. And once I got into Knott's, then that was now I'm kind of in the
Right.
theme park business,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So Disney was still off to the side, kind of keeping an eye on stuff that I was doing. They'd come out to all my things and see everything that I would do and send out professional staffing people and everything. And they'd always watch what I was doing. So, but it was, I got my roots, launched with Knott's and everything. And then eventually got into some small things at Disney, some window stuff, some parade float stuff,
hmm,
little things. And then everything I did with Disney and some of the other parks seem to, every time I do something, I do it successfully, they give me something bigger.
yeah,
And then I do something bigger, and I do something bigger. And then pretty soon it just started getting just growing and growing and growing.
yeah. Now there's a guy sitting behind you that is
Mr. Cheese.
Mr. Cheese, exactly. Chuck E.
Yeah.
Cheese. How did that come about? And that must have been great because it's the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, that was unusual. So the company had figures already in their restaurants. They had multiple figure shows, and but they were old and getting kind of stale.
Yeah.
So they came and said, we want a new character that has a lot of functions, a Disney quality character that we can put out in all of our restaurants. Call it Studio C, what they were going to call it. And so they had a competition. So I wasn't the only animatronic company in the world at the time. There were a few others that were pretty well known, had done a lot of big things. And they had a competition really basically with us. They said, okay, everybody design a Chuck E. Cheese. And you know, I was included in that. Design the Chuck E. Cheese, functions, look, and cost. And it's basically a competition. We'll pick the best one. And I was very fortunate that they picked our design, my design for the first one. And that led to over 550 Chuck E. Cheese restaurants, restaurant shows that we did over about 25-year period, which was enormous. I mean, 550 restaurant shows, that's a big job.
Yeah, it is.
So that turned it into a giant facility and equipment and people and everything. It really launched it, and then doing the other theme park work along the side.
Yeah, so that helped it become more of a kind of an assembly line.
It was a real thing, and then and we, so most of our business in general is creating unique and unusual things. I mean, to this day, you know, the phone will ring and somebody will say, I want 100 singing canaries, or I want a brontosaurus that's 80 feet long and it's eating a Volkswagen, right? I mean, it could be anything. I mean, we literally get the weirdest stuff you can imagine. But that was something that was good because it could kind of set off to the side, and it was just one after another for 20 something years. It was just like a standard product, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. So out of your story, I think one of the most amazing things, and this is something I wish, especially many of the younger entrepreneurs would understand. Your greatest dream was that Disney would call you on the phone one day and say, Garner Holt, we want to invite you to join the team, be part of the Disney family, work in Imagineering. And yet that phone call never came. In my opinion, that's one of the best things that ever happened to
you. Absolutely. I mean, if I would have gone to work at Disney, I would have been a small spoke in a large wheel, and it would have maybe worked on a few projects here and there. This way, I've been able to work on, you know, dozens and dozens of Disney projects all over the world that I wouldn't have been able to work on with internally, and done it kind of my own way in a sense. And you know, I mean, it's been a great thing.
Looking at your story, which had a lot of ups and downs, a lot of doubtful moments, I imagine a lot of dark moments where you're like doubting, will this ever take off, especially at the beginning. What would you tell any young entrepreneur who, you know, they've got this dream, they've got this vision of, I know this is what I can do, just nobody's taking me seriously right now. I'm not getting the jobs I need. I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag in my warehouse in my company because that's the rent I can afford is my business. In looking at your life, what would you share with some of these up and coming creatives and entrepreneurs?
If they're at that point, they've kind of halfway there, because to find something that you really are obsessed with, that you want to do, that you love to do, that you want to, you know, I've been fortunate to win a couple Entrepreneur of the Year awards, and in doing that, I've become a judge. And one of the things when I judge entrepreneurs, it kind of surprised me at first. I'd notice how obsessed people were with different things. You know, a guy had an idea for a guitar, and he said, you know, I spent the last 10 years working on this. You know, every day I work on this idea. And a guy had a mosquito repellent, and he told me, he said, I've been working with mosquitoes for, you know, the last 15 years, and that's all I think about is mosquitoes. And I'm like, these are the same people as I am. That's
Yeah.
how I was at Animatronics. They're obsessed with something,
Yeah.
and then, you know, and they're trying to make it work, and they just never give up. And that's the other half of it, is once you have something that you are obsessed with, that you really love, that you want to keep moving with, just you know, you're going to run into obstacles. They're going to be, you know, horrendous obstacles, but you just overcome them, and you just keep going. You just never give up in your dream. You know what I mean? You just keep forging ahead no matter what happens. And that's the best advice I can give.
How do you help people determine? Because I imagine a lot of people come to you and say you've achieved great success and they've got their idea. How do you help people understand the difference between achievable dreams and kind of pipe dreams? You know, have you ever dealt with someone you're like, I'm not sure if what they have in their mind really, they have the passion behind it to carry through to the end?
You know, I almost, you know, I'm almost afraid to criticize anybody for any dream, because, you know, I wouldn't compare myself in any way to, but the first thing that came into mind, like, I mean, look at somebody like Elon Musk, who, I'm going to build rockets like NASA and go to space. You know, when I was a kid, it's like, I'm going to build things at Disneyland, and end up building full-blown attractions for Disney. I mean, who would ever have believed a kid could build attractions for Disney? You know, it had never been done. And so I think even the wildest dreams, if you can really forge ahead and just not give up on them, I mean, maybe they'll change or go a different path, and you might be forced to take a different path, but why not shoot for the moon? You know what I mean?
I agree. I always tell people, because they're like, how do I know if this is part of my purpose or not? It's something I can accomplish or not? And I ask them, I say, can you stop thinking about it? Because if you can stop thinking about it, you're not supposed to do it. But if you can't stop thinking about it, it's your waking moment, your sleeping moment, every moment in between, I've got to do this. If you can't stop thinking about it.
That's been me for 45 years, thinking about animatronics. I mean, from the very beginning, that's been me for forever, you know? I mean,
I love that.
It's an obsession, you know?
Well, I want to talk about this obsession, and I want to talk about, because many people watching the show really want to get into the brass tacks. You know, how do you go through the process of taking something from your mind to creating, taking a passion for a certain industry and saying, I will do this? And so I want to talk about your creative process. I want to talk about how you approach being an entrepreneur, a business owner, and I want to talk about how you overcome obstacles and how you deal with pushback throughout the natural experience that is doing the creative arts like you do. And we want you to come back to part 2 of this conversation with Garner Holt. We're going to be taking a look at his approach to overcoming obstacles, how you can achieve your dreams, and ultimately how to be successful in what you're passionate about. So come back for part 2 right here at the lifestyle.org podcast.